I've also made bad choices in some of the jobs, I'll be honest, you
Okay.
know. Should have listened to my gut, should have seen the red flags, chose not to because I just was like, no, this looks good on paper. I've learnt more from the places that I didn't enjoy working. You're never going to get vulnerability and authenticity out of your team if you don't role model it first.
Why do you think making mistakes is such a critical path to walk as a professional?
My goodness, if you've learned a lesson, you certainly don't do it again. I can't stress that enough. Like, understanding a broader picture is really, really important.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered in partnership with the Marketing Academy. I'm joined by the always delightful Terri Martin. Terri, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Dan.
So for those that don't know Terri is the CEO and founder of the Business Bunch and head of corporate at the National Institute of Dramatic Art. Terri's held a litany of very senior GM roles across sales and finance, including the Marketing Room, Kimberley Education and the Dimmock's Children's Charity. Mm-hmm. You're currently the non-executive director and vice chair at ADHD Australia, a topic very close to my heart. And, you know, in my sort of what I call A-side research into you, what I loved was a really deep investment in non-executive roles. You've got a raft of youth-oriented mentorship positions, mentoring across future women in the Marketing Academy. Yep. Firstly, where do you find the time? But that, my friend, is what I call the A-side. I would love to go into the B side of things. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on under the hood of what is a very, very impressive Rolodex of roles.
Wow. Okay. So let's go under the hood. Look, essentially, if you were to ask me about myself, I'd refer to myself first as a mother.
Okay.
So that role's really, really important to me. I made a choice to have children and, they're my responsibility to make sure they're awesome humans. So I would say that's first. Yeah, my career, has been squiggly and there's reasons for that. At some points I was like, I need to give back. I need more purpose. And, that's great. And yes, you go into organisations with purpose, but sometimes they're actually really tough to work in. And you kind of go, I miss the creativity or, the commercialism. But, under all of that, I guess as a kid that was very sensitive, raised in hotels. My parents were publicans.
Okay.
So we moved all around Australia. So I was very good at kind of meeting new people at new schools and having to kind of adapt very, very quickly and get people to like me because that's, make or break in a school when you're only there for a year. My father passed away when I was 10. He died of suicide and a hugest impact on my life. Yeah, it's fine. It is what it is, right? And I became a bursary child. You do that so that you can continue the education. And I don't carry that with me, but it does. It plays a role in who I am and how I was raised. But amazing mum who just believed in me and was just like adamant that I was going to do better than her. And then I got a degree in business and then my first role was in a sales promotion agency in Sydney. And then really it's just kind of taken from there. So I lived in London for 4 years, worked at Nickelodeon, which was an amazing job. And then came back and had kids, worked in different kind of places. Mainly in account service and agency, but I actually, what I've learnt since is I much prefer to not be right in the detail. I like to be across everything. I want to understand how everything works, not just that one part. Tell me how the finance works and what about legal and, creativity and brand and all that kind of thing and how it all works together. So I feel like I've gotten to a good place in my career where I'm able to really kind of use those skills and that experience now.
You used the term squiggly. What's made your career squiggly?
Maybe not knowing what I was good at. Maybe not able to determine really where I was going to flourish or what kind of environment I was going to be best working in. I've also made bad choices in some of the jobs, I'll be honest, you know. Like I've gone into them with all best intentions. Should have listened to my gut, should have seen the red flags, chose not to because I just was like, no, this looks good on paper. And then it hasn't turned out. And but I actually don't have one single regret because I've learnt more from the places that I didn't enjoy working than I have from the places that I have.
And what would be the three things, if you were to pick three, that you've learnt from the mistakes that you've made along the way? Always
listen to your gut. Don't rush. I go very fast. I'm really fast paced and that's great sometimes. My motto is like get shit done, right? So that works sometimes, but when you're making just really big decisions, and you're not listening to your gut, you're moving too fast, and then you turn around and go, I actually knew this was going to happen. I should have actually, just slowed down a bit and listened to myself. So yeah, listen to your gut, don't go so fast. And even if things aren't great, just look at what you can learn from it. Just take in the learnings of what you could have. That's a good one. No matter what happens to you, you've got to understand what role you played in it, right? So even if you have, for example, a really toxic boss, and maybe you can't change that because that's who they are, but did you stay a bit long? Should you have maybe not taken that job? Were there signals that you should have seen? Was there something you could have done better to avoid, them, etc.? So always taking responsibility for what you can control and how you manage that. It's really, really important.
I want to go back because you mentioned quite an interesting backdrop in terms of your upbringing. I'd love to get your perspective on what are the things that you've collected, positive or negative, along the way that have been carried with you, not necessarily as baggage, but certainly as building blocks for you as a leader today, from what seems to be from the outside in a really colourful and dynamic upbringing.
Yeah. Look, I think probably a little bit too much emphasis on wanting to be liked.
Okay.
And if you think about that, when I was telling you we moved every year, that it was actually part of my survival mode. I was kind of like, I got to get in here and get people to like me so I can cope. But, taking that on as you get older just doesn't work anymore. And in leadership, we all know, right? It's not about being liked, it's about being respected. So, that could have been dropped a little earlier. Mm-hmm. I think one of the big things I'm really proud of is I'm incredibly empathetic. I think people who've gone through tough situations in their lives bring a level of emotion and an understanding and empathy that's beyond anything. I think they're the best kind of people because they're able to go, I may not have been in your position, but I've been in something else. And so I can understand that this is hard. And I think that's really integral in leadership.
Yeah, to walk a mile in their shoes.
100%.
I'm curious, how do you work through the needing to be liked? One of the things, and the sort of the thematic of this series around the many faces that we wear, the filters that we put up.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that need to be liked, that we're all status-driven creatures, right? But that's how we're wired.
Yeah.
How do you go about unshackling yourself from that? Or is it, it could maybe still be a work in progress, but...
In all honesty, it's a work in progress. I think it's so deeply embedded in who I am. I think when your knowledge and your experience starts to ramp up and you walk into a room and you've got the confidence to know what you're talking about, that's when you can drop a little bit of the being liked, because you're like, I don't actually care because I actually know what I'm talking about. Like, I couldn't do that at the beginning of my career because there's so much I didn't know. So I think some of that gravity comes when you've just, you've done the jobs you've been doing for a really long time. You can hold court because you're an expert. I think with a bit of age as well, you start to go, does it really matter? I've actually got my friends, I've got my family, I've got my kids. Do I really need this person across the room that I'm never going to see again, to like me? Does it really matter? I think maturity comes, just changes that a bit as well.
Are there self-management strategies that you put in place, knowing that it's sort of still a work in progress, that would help someone that's listening in or watching this that might be looking at themselves going, I see a little bit of myself in that? Being
aware of it, being aware. I think, like anything, right, the first step is to be aware that you're doing it, and then you can obviously mitigate it. But I think it's kind of saying, does it really matter to yourself if this person likes me or not? It's not a popularity contest. Doesn't mean you're an asshole, but does it really matter? Like, that's the thing I'd be asking myself. I can see myself doing it, but does it really matter if they like me or not? No, it doesn't. Maybe it does, because maybe the dynamics are that it is actually really important you have a relationship with this person. But if it's not, just try and let it go. Just try and let it go and let other things be important. Like I said, the respect, is what should really be coming through in your career.
So you and I have had a couple of chats before today, and there's two territories I'd love to have a chat to you about. The first is closer to home to me, which is, the role of your kids and the integration between being a mum and being a professional.
Yeah.
Now, you have quite a unique parenting circumstance, don't you?
Yeah. So I've got two kids who aren't really kids anymore. So my son's 20 and my daughter's 16. And I'm no longer with their father, so we've been separated for 14 years. I've remarried, but my husband lives in Brisbane.
Okay.
So we travel back and forth.
And for those that don't know, this is a Sydney-based production.
Yep.
So that is an interstate marriage.
Interstate marriage, yeah. We've been together for about 9 years. I have known him since I was 15, so that kind of makes it easier. Both of us wanted to, we weren't interested in separating our children from their other parents. And we also had roles and work in those states. So, yeah, there's a lot to juggle, and it's not easy. That's the thing I will say is I think what can happen is people will look at people and go, God, how do they do it? It looks amazing. There's tears, there's breakdowns, there's times where you go, I just actually don't know how to do this. I'm not doing anything very well. And that happens probably more than you think. And but you just do the best you can. And, parenting for me is first. That's my priority. But I also need to pay the bills and have a career and do all that as well. So I have to juggle it. I don't know how I juggle it, I'll be honest. I don't.
You've stolen the next question, which is how do you go about integrating those two things? Because, as a father of two young kids, parenting guilt is a very real thing, you know, to what you said earlier. You think you're doing neither well. Yeah. And I think that this is a universal problem for those, that are looking to foster careers. What have you found has worked? And on the other side of the coin, where may have you misstepped and found that you might have pushed the boat a little too far or swung the pendulum, a little bit too far out? And what have you taken from that?
I don't know the answer because I'm still struggling with it. I think it's about being present. So, okay, for example, I have things on at night. I might have a board meeting or I'm doing an acting class at NIDA that's nothing to do with the job I have. It's crazy. But anyway, and I feel a lot of guilt about leaving my daughter at home. She's 16. She's totally fine. She doesn't care whether I'm there anyway. But I also know that I need to fill up my cup. I need to be full. I need to have a life beyond just sitting waiting for my kids to ask me to do things and do them for them. They need to know that I can prioritise myself. So that's one thing. But the other thing is being present. So when I am there and they're there, put the bloody phone down, listen, even if they're just whinging about something, just listen. You don't, just be there at the times. Because that's the thing with teens is they don't want to talk to you when you want to talk to them. They want to talk at exactly the time that suits them, and it may not be right for you. For example, I was supposed to be on a meeting last night, and my daughter started talking to me about a challenge she's got, and I just made a decision, I'm not going to the meeting. And I just sat there with her, and I listened to her because she was quite distressed. And that was a decision I made at that moment, and I have no regrets about that because if I didn't capture her at that moment, how do you think she would have felt? She wanted to be listened to. She wanted to talk to me about the problem. I know not everyone can do that, especially if you're not senior. But for me, that was absolutely what I was doing at that moment. So I made a choice. So sometimes you can't. Sometimes I have to apologise to my kids and say, I'm so sorry, I've actually got to go, I've got to do this. But then I'll call them later or I'll do something later and make it up to them. So I don't know the answer, Dan. It's just even when they're teenagers and they're older, you're still trying to juggle it. So
let me reframe it a different way. If you could go back to Terri 14 years ago, you got a little 2-year-old, knowing what you know now, knowing the guilt that we're all going to feel along the way, right, which is part and parcel, what would be the advice that you'd give to yourself?
Well, that's a very interesting question at that particular time because I went back to an agency and I went back part-time at a time, so that's quite a few years ago, right, at a time when no one was working part-time in an agency, right? No one was a parent. And I was the only one, aside from some admin staff. And I was like, oh, I've got this. How amazing, right? I can do a senior account director in an ad agency. They get to pay me for 3 days. Happy days, everyone's happy. 2 weeks later, I was working full time.
Yeah, we all know that it never lasts 3 days. The ability to compartmentalise is just a fallacy.
100%. And I know there are a lot of businesses really trying, and I do believe that we've made a lot of headway in that. But my God, no. And I really struggled, and I struggled mentally, and I lost lots of weight. I just was juggling a really stressful client as well. And I think it's really hard for me to go, oh, Terri, what would you do? Would you actually have not done that job? And then I go, yeah, but again, I learnt so much at that. I learnt what I didn't want to do. My mum was looking after my kids, so I felt okay about that. If I had have had them in childcare, especially my daughter, at that point, I probably would have felt even more guilt. Yeah. So I kind of was like, it's okay. She's like me, my mum. So I don't know. My advice is you've got to do what's right for you and what feels right for you. Some people don't have as much guilt. Some people have too much. You've got to find the balance. You've got to have a happy balance of being able to be there for the kids, but also be able to do work. So my thing is be present when you are with them. Being with them and then sitting on your phone, that's not, and it's okay to be on your phone, but that's not time with them. Putting the phone away and actually playing with them for half an hour is better than being with them for 4 hours sitting on your phone while they're watching TV. So think about the time you do have with them and make it really special.
Yeah, I was given some great advice from someone else that's come on the podcast around resentment, right? The last thing that you ever want is to resent your kids. And I think that balance between filling your cup and filling their cup, but never at the expense of one another, I think is really great guidance.
Yeah, that's very true.
The other area that I wanted to touch on was sitting across both business ownership and corporate roles, which I know that you currently straddle to, but you've sort of, you've sat on both sides of the fence. Yep. And, for those that are in corporate that might be looking to go into business ownership, or those that are in business ownership in corporate, I'd love to get your take as a professional, what are the things that you've learned along the way, and what might be hiding in plain sight for those that are coming in doe-eyed?
Oh, okay. So here's the thing, right? I'd run businesses.
Yep.
So the beauty of that is I know about all the different things that make up a business. I know about HR, ops, IT, you name it, I've done it. So you go in thinking, hey, that's cool. I'll do it for myself because I've got it, covered. And I know that everyone says you've got to do everything, but you have to do everything, which means you are really responsible for thinking ahead and the vision of the business. So think about perhaps partnerships I have to make, or things like people I've got to talk to that may not come off now but might come off down the track. At the same time, you're putting invoices into Xero and thinking, hey, does this match with what I agreed to?
We're out of paper clips. Who's going to get them?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, my computer doesn't work. Oh my God, who do I talk to? And you're doing everything, and the natural thing that will happen is you'll gravitate towards the things that are easy. And you won't want to do the things that are hard or that you haven't done before, and you just have to do them because there's no one else to turn to. It's also, if you're opening a business on your own, it is actually really lonely. And I think, again, some people are fine with that. When I talk about loneliness, I talk about the fact that I don't have anyone to bounce stuff on. Like, oh, hey, Dan, God, this happened. And you might go, oh, don't worry about it, that happened to me. Or, hey, what do you think of this? No, try this. Oh, okay, yeah. I never valued how important that was to me.
And how did you go about closing that gap as a business owner?
I got an advisory board.
Okay.
So I got 4 amazing people who are really, really savvy. And so we would meet every few months, and I would come with them with challenges, and then we would talk them through. And they had just amazing perspectives. And they were able to kind of see through my emotion and my, and kind of just go, yeah, I know you're feeling this, but X, Y, Z. And so that's really, really important, is either a mentor, a coach, or an advisory board that can help you to bounce kind of business ideas and things you're feeling. It's really, really important.
Now, I know mentorship is something that you're particularly passionate about and heavily involved in.
Yep.
In your mind, what's the real benefit of having a network? Maybe in less of a structured manner, unlike an advisory board, but as a professional, certainly a professional that's looking to consistently sharpen their axe, so to speak.
Yep.
The role of a network and a bench and mentors and that sort of those social support structures to make you who you are.
I think it's particularly important when you can't see the forest for the trees.
Okay.
And when your emotions perhaps are getting a little bit too much of you. And I don't mean you're crying. I mean, you're just invested, right? So you're like, oh, this has happened and I'm not sure what to do. And, I'm angry about it, or I'm upset about it, or I'm frustrated. And they're able to just kind of cut through that because they see it from a totally different perspective. So I've got a wonderful, amazing young woman I mentor. She's incredible. She's going places. And I could hear in her voice her frustration at something that had happened at work. And I said, I sense that. And I said, but you're going to have to work through that, because either you deal with it and you keep on in this role and you actually accept it. Otherwise, I said, you're going to burn out. Or it's that big a deal that you move on. You could see that kind of, oh, yeah, you've seen that. She hadn't told me she was frustrated. It was her energy. It was her words. And so you kind of cut through that and go, that's not going to serve you. So you've got to kind of do something with it. And so I was able to kind of cut through her emotion, and I think that's a really important thing.
And if we turn the mirror back towards yourself, I'd love to get a specific example of a time where maybe you haven't seen the forest from the trees and a mentor's walked that path with you.
Okay, so I had someone resign on me, right? And I was so pissed off because of the way they'd done it and what led up to that. And they were feeling a bit victimised, and I felt victimised. And I went and talked to someone and I said, I'm just so pissed off. They did this, they did this. And they turned to me and said, but what could you have done better? And I was like, oh my God, you haven't heard me. They've done this, they've done that. And he was just like, no, I'm going to ask you again. What could you have done better? Either what could you have done in that situation, or what can you do next time so it doesn't happen again? And it really short-circuited me because I was wanting to actually probably play the victim. And I realised at that point that we do have control. Like I said, even if something happens to us that's bad, how do we avoid it in the future? And we've always got to play in every relationship. You know, even if one person's really bad, the other person's doing something. So it kind of makes you realise that you are in control of things.
And sometimes you're the problem.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's exactly true, yeah. And that's when you've got to identify that as well, right?
And one of the things that I often hear most is, but I just don't know where to find a mentor and how to take the first step. I'd love to get your advice on that, Part A, how do you go about finding a mentor? And part B, what are the ingredients to a great mentor-mentee relationship in your mind?
So the first question about where to find one, interestingly enough, I was looking for one when I found the Marketing Academy.
Okay.
So I was like, where do I find one? Where do I find one? And then I just happened to see an ex-client of mine who'd been on the Marketing Academy the year before, had something in their title that said ex-scholar. And I was like, that's weird. And then looked it up and then contacted him and he told me about it. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. So I went down that route. The other mentor I've had are people who I've worked with before, who've been bosses of mine who I respect. Another one was someone introduced me to. They said, oh, this woman is actually amazing. She's really progressed in her career. I think, well, the things you're struggling with, she could probably help you with. What was the second question?
What are the ingredients for success in terms of a mentor-mentee relationship?
For me personally, I think it's that the mentee needs to understand that they need to drive it. So they need to come with some challenges, talk them through, and first and foremost as a mentor, just listen. I'm not trying to be friends with them. So that is one area where I'm not interested in being friends. But listen to them and listen to everything around the edges. So, yeah, they might be telling you something, but what else are you hearing? And then sharing kind of anecdotes of things that you've been through. Like, the mentee that I was talking to the other day, all of a sudden she said something and I just saw myself. And I was like, oh, I need to tell her to watch out for this. And so I was really honest and I said, I'm going to be really honest here. This is actually a challenge I have. It's around letting go of control. And I said, it actually affected this personal area of my life and I'm going to just share that with you because I don't want that for you as well. And she was like, yes, I've actually already started to experience that. I see that now. And so, it's that kind of thing of being vulnerable and being honest. And, sometimes it's, recognising what they're doing and rather than telling them and giving them advice, just going, listen, this has been a problem for me. This is how I dealt with it. Maybe you could too.
You mentioned a word that I think is pretty important, vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think post-pandemic, I think we're on a really good trajectory towards authenticity and vulnerability in leadership. How have you encouraged that amongst your staff and your peers in businesses that you've worked in, knowing that, and I'm presuming that you and I are on the same page in terms of just how important that is to get the best out of your people?
100%. I'm all for it. You're never going to get vulnerability and authenticity out of your team if you don't role model it first and then continue to role model it. So if you've sat on your high horse and said, oh, yeah, my team can make mistakes. Well, have you made a mistake? And have you admitted to that mistake? And have you apologised or, shown that you're trying to rectify it? Oh, I don't care if people come to me and they don't know they don't know the answers to questions. Have you admitted that you don't know the answers to questions? So you've got to role model it. Talking about the Marketing Academy, you go through this thing called the Living Leader, and it's about being really honest about who you are. And the first person who does it is the person who takes the Living Leader course, and they're brutally honest, and everyone just kind of sat there going, oh, okay, that really sets the tone. Now, if she hadn't done that, none of us would have been so open and honest. So you've got to model the behaviour. So the behaviour is, I don't always know the answers. I get things wrong. I apologise when I'm wrong. It's okay to make mistakes. We've just got to learn from them. So please don't make them twice. It's that kind of thing. And I will be always doing that myself. So I can't expect. It's kind of do as I say and as I do.
I want to shift gears a little bit towards education, right? I think the other pillar of a growth mindset and what I think makes exceptional leaders is, this unquenchable thirst, so to speak, for learning and sharpening the tools.
Yep.
What's been your philosophy with ongoing learning and how have you approached it as someone that clearly doesn't have enough hours in the day?
Yeah. First of all, understand how best you learn.
Oh, I like that. Okay, go deeper.
Okay, all right. So I am actually not particularly good in a theoretical classroom environment, right? I get frustrated that I need context. I learn by doing. I learn by mirroring. So, you know, if you were to say, Terri, do you want to do, you know, the GICD, the director's course, or do you want to do an MBA? I'd be like, how are we doing that? And then you'd be like, well, you come in here and you'd go online, you'd sit and listen. I actually just know myself, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm going to find that stressful. And I find it really hard to retain information. I'm much better by doing and being part of things. You know, I mentioned I'm doing an acting course just for fun. Oh my God, I learned so much because I'm doing and I'm getting feedback. The feedback's positive. And so it really makes my soul sing, right? And it's right for me and the way I learn. So I think the biggest thing is about that. And I've got so many experiences because I've got neurodiverse children, and it's like, work out what works for you. You know, maybe it's about putting yourself in another business and learning what that is. I don't see learning as traditional, like by the book, that kind of thing. I'm all about learning in the way that really suits you and where you learn best.
I love that. I think that's a great philosophy. In the spirit of unfiltered, what are the work-ons for Terri right now? What are you working on?
You know what the biggest challenge I have is being comfortable to allow people to do things that I can already see the answers to.
I don't think you're Robinson Crusoe when it comes to that as a challenge.
Because I work so fast, you know, sometimes I just go, I can just do it. And I then can also go the opposite way, which is really bad as well, which is just, I'll just let you do it, right? And they don't have the knowledge or the experience, nor do they know what I'm actually looking for. So you've got to come into the middle that goes, I'm going to let you do it, but I'm going to put up some guardrails that help you to understand some of my expectations. So that might be, how about you get it done the first draft by Friday? It might be, can you use these tools to do it? It might be, make sure you research this, you know, so that at least when I'm getting something, it's not so far from what I thought, that we're on a journey together. I really struggle with that. Like that's not just at work, it's also with my kids. Like,
and have you gone about striking that right balance?
I think it's, trying to catch myself. And I've also, the biggest thing that I've recognised is that when you do that to people, it makes them feel really undermined and can actually make them feel really useless. And I've actually had people do it to me, and it makes me feel useless. And I go, okay, so that's how I feel. I've got to remember that's how it makes people feel. So it's just, again, it's being aware of how, I guess, it impacts those people you're doing it to.
One of the things that I love in chatting to you is your generosity with the times that you've gotten it wrong. And one of the things that I see in professionals is perfection is often celebrated and progression tends to be still, in some circles, a stigmatized word. Why do you think making mistakes is such a critical path to walk as a professional?
Oh, God, that's where we learn, you know, like it hurts, it bruises our pride, maybe it makes you lose money, maybe it, you know, ruins relationships. Sure, that's horrendous. But my goodness, if you've learned a lesson, you certainly don't do it again. Here's an example, right? I had this young guy working for me. He was a designer. He was so incredibly creative. He was amazing, but had very little commercial experience. And he came into the role, and a lot of the time we were just trying to kind of pull him in. Anyway, he put a little note in some artwork that was meant to go to account service, which was a joke about the client, and it accidentally went to the client. And it wasn't great because the client rang me and complained, of course, right? I sat down with him and he was devastated. Like, I could see it in him, and I thought, there is no point in me hurting him anymore by trying to punish him beyond what I could see he's already punishing himself. And so I kind of let him go and I said, that's enough, it just will never happen again. Now, fast forward 10 years and he actually reminded me of that story. I'd forgotten. And so it's about, you know, it's about how we personally deal with our failures, but it's also about how other people deal with them so that we don't carry them for the rest of our lives, that we actually learn from them. We don't suffer from them.
Yeah, know what to jettison and how long to hold it on to.
Yeah.
The other side to that coin in my mind, you know, one part is really building resilience as a muscle. And I think with that comes stress management and anxiety management. And, you know, given what you and I have discussed, you know, particularly around neurodiversity and the roles that you play there, I think that you've probably got some real wisdom to talk to us about. I'd love to understand, how do you go about helping staff with mindset and particularly emotional regulation when they may be stressful circumstances, or, you know, they may have heightened awareness to certain anxieties?
So First of all, you've got to understand what kind of person they are, because if they're really, really, really driven, they'll just have a tendency to take on more and more and more, and it's not natural for them to say no to stuff. So again, working with them to go, this is actually hurting you. You know, I can see you're burning out and I can see it's not working for you. How can I help? And then maybe they'll give you an answer, but it's actually not the right answer anyway. Maybe you know.
They'll tell you what you want to hear.
That's right. That's right. Or maybe it's the kind of thing, and you've got to kind of go, no, actually you need to help this way. I'm just a big believer in just really watching, and you want to catch it before it becomes a problem and someone does burn out. So if you see it, let them take time off, you know, let them go early, do the things for them that maybe they're just not kind of capable of because they're trying to do a good job and things like that. I think it's becoming even more critical. You're getting a younger generation of young people coming along who their baseline of mental well-being is actually lower than ours.
Why is that?
Oh, well, I've got my theories. I think it's too much screen time. I think it's too much access to the internet. I think it's the fact that they can see everything that their friends are doing that they're not. I think it's always on. So, you know, I know, for example, I've got 3 email addresses, right? So I know what a pain in the ass that is to check those all the time. But then, you know, what if you've got Snapchat and you've got TikTok and you've got, you know, and it goes on and on and on and on and on, and it's so overwhelming. And I also think they're so used to communicating via their thumbs because it's easier. So what's happened is that just their life is just this kind of, you know, all in their hands and all on their screens, instead of just moving it away and going, okay, what have we actually got going on here? I know for a fact when I'm sitting on social media, I don't feel great after it, you know? You don't go, God, I feel great seeing all those people who are richer and, you know, more successful than me. God, I feel really wonderful.
Everybody's having a ball but me.
That's right. Look at that boat. I don't need that, you know. So I know I walk away from it. Imagine if you're, you know, 15 and all you're seeing is a bunch of what looks like really popular girls and boys who have got more than you, you know, all of that kind of thing. We don't see their backstory. Maybe their dad's not there, whatever, but you don't see that. Their brains are growing, right? And that stuff hurts, and you never feel as good enough. And then added to that, you've just got a sea of information coming at you, some which isn't very good for you, you know, some which isn't healthy. You add all of that together. I think that's why.
Do you think we're that different with the advent of professional socials? You know, I see so many analogies, you know, to everybody's career is blossoming but mine, and that sort of onslaught of it's, you know, it's all going on around me. What's going, you know, where's my place in this? And
it's 100% the same. Yeah, it's 100%. It doesn't matter what platform, you know, we want to show the best side of us. We don't want to show where we're suffering or where we're not got things quite right, because it's embarrassing, and, you know, you feel bruised your ego, and, you know, oh God, I've got this kind of, or no, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's like this I'm trying to project this kind of vision of myself because I'm trying to also do business with these people, right? I don't want to be doing with someone who's bitching and moaning on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So,
and how much of our professional worth is sort of garnered from these externalities versus, you know, what fundamentally fills our cup.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Last sort of area I wanted to cover off is the road ahead. What do you think marketing practitioners are going to look like over the next few years? What are going to be the keys to success for really successful marketers and or business owners over the coming years?
First and foremost, what I've noticed a bit is there's this shift from brand and the importance of building brand to driving sales. And I really noticed it last year. Everyone was like, I need marketing to drive sales. I need marketing to drive sales. And it's like, yes, but that's not all that does, and there's also a bigger job to be done with marketing. I think it's a bit of a precarious place, actually, is that if we get into everything about marketing is driving sales, it's going to get very short term. No brands are going to stand out. The second the promotion stops, the brand stops. So that for me is a watch out, and I'm hoping that we go back to a bit of brand work and we focus on that. Obviously, we've got all this technology. Wonderful, right? AI, get it, no problem. But I think that what we get lost in is not thinking about what the customer actually needs. So
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, right. Like, you know, we pull in all this technology and no one's actually going, does the customer actually need it? It's okay if you don't have a chatbot on your site because maybe the customer doesn't need it, because maybe their queries are actually too nuanced for the chatbot to be able to pick it up. I was actually on the phone to a government body personally, right? And I called up, they're like, can you tell us in a short, you know, sentence what you're looking for? So I said it. And I know what I was asking for was something a lot of people would be asking. And they were like, did you mean this or this? And I was like, neither. So I had to do it again and again. And then in the end, they're like, we'll put you through to a person. I'm like, that's what I wanted in the first place. And so I was actually quite frustrated by the time I got on the phone. And I go, I know that someone would have said this is what we need to do so that we can, corral our phone, the people who phone up into the right areas. But actually what it's doing is causing frustration. So technology is amazing and awesome, and I love it when it's used really well. But just what we've always got to be looking at it through a lens of, is it necessary and is it actually adding value or is it detracting? And that could be for staff as well, because a lot of, technology is put in behind the scenes for staff. Input this and do this and speak here and talk to finance through this app and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, again, is that making people's jobs really, really hard because there's so many different silos of technology across different areas? So I'm always about know your customer. And know your staff as well, because we all know if they're happy, then the customers will be happy too. I
love that. I think I couldn't agree more. I think this disintermediation between our customers and our executives, through either the filters of technology or the many filters of technology, has forced, I think a misstep or a lost sight in fundamentally what the customer wants and needs.
Yeah.
Last one from me, and then we'll wrap this up. For those that might be tuning in, that are on their journey upwards to become senior executives across marketing or advertising, what advice would you give them as they embark on their journeys?
What I would say is get to know parts of the business that you're in that aren't just yours.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if all you want to do is marketing, but if ultimately, even if you just want, you'd like to be excellent at digital marketing and that's all you want to do, no problem. But understand bits of the pieces of finance and legal and logistics. Understand how it all plays, because it makes you able to do your job better. Especially then if you're saying, well, one day I want to be a CEO, 100% start talking. Talk to finance, talk to HR, understand the nuances, understand the business vision, understand how your boss's strategy fits into that. Even if you possibly don't understand it, I can't stress that enough. Like, understanding a broader picture is really, really important. I remember when we used to have clients and we'd be in advertising and they'd be brand managers and marketing managers of FMCG products. And this before I'd take that advice, of course. And you'd be like, gosh, we're so important. Why aren't they calling me back? We're doing this ad campaign. Because you know what? Their job is so complex and so big. And if you actually understood it a little bit better, you'd probably want to help to make things easier for them.
And you'd know where you fit in
That's
as
right.
the cog in the wheel. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you could start to look at things and be a better account service because you'd be like, oh, I've actually noticed this and, and this is what they're doing and that fits in here. And I'm a big believer in making friends with other departments and like I said, even if you don't fully understand now, just getting that knowledge is just pure gold.
So that's the A side advice.
Yes.
What's the B side advice?
Listen to your gut. If you've got high EI, listen to your gut. Like, don't rush decisions. Like, sometimes also I've rushed because I've gone, these people really want me to work for them. And I've not listened to the red flags or this job will look good on my CV, but actually I should have been braver to go, that doesn't actually matter because this is going to be horrendous if I work there. And so just slow down, especially I think people probably race a bit more these days, but slow down, listen to your gut and just, think things through about, what the next step is. You don't have to race out if things aren't bad at where you're working now.
It's wonderful advice.
Yeah.
Terri, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
It's been
you.
an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you, Dan.